You have considered it. Everyone has, if they are honest. Not the moral argument, not the legal risk, just the math. A product that costs almost nothing to produce sells for 1,000 times that on the street, and the demand is guaranteed because addiction does not care about recessions. You imagine a compound in the mountains, pallets of cash, men in tactical gear who never ask questions, a global enterprise operating outside every rule, the ultimate owner-operator business. Except here is the part the movies leave out. The global illegal drug market is estimated at $400 to $650 billion a year, nearly 1% of all global trade. That is bigger than the global pharmaceutical industry. And despite those numbers, the vast majority of people who work in this business earn less than minimum wage. The cartel bosses who survive long enough to enjoy their wealth are statistical outliers. The rest are dead, in prison, or working for someone who is. Because the drug business is not a license to print money. It is a logistics nightmare with a 1 in 4 chance of prison time and an operating model designed to destroy itself.
Let us start with the markup, because that is the number everybody wants to know. A kilogram of cocaine costs roughly $1,500 to produce in Colombia. By the time it reaches the street in the United States, that same kilogram is worth $66,000 retail, and by modern estimates, it can reach $120,000. That is a markup of 40 to 80 times. A kilogram of heroin costs $2,600 in Pakistan and sells for $130,000 in the United States. Methamphetamine costs $300 to $500 per kilogram to manufacture and sells for up to $60,000. On paper, these are the best margins in the history of commerce. But here is the catch. The supply chain between the farm and the user has 6 to 8 middlemen, each taking a cut, each with their own cost structure, and each facing a 10 to 40% chance that the entire shipment gets seized at their stage. The United Nations estimates that law enforcement intercepts approximately 13% of heroin shipments and 28 to 40% of cocaine shipments. That means if you run 4 shipments of cocaine, you statistically lose at least 1 entirely. The product does not vanish from your books. You cannot claim shrinkage on your taxes. You just eat the loss and try again. Here is a number that will reframe everything you think you know about cartel economics. A former DEA agent named Robert Stutman once described the drug business this way. The average drug trafficking organization from Medellin to the streets of New York could afford to lose 90% of its product and still be profitable. Let that sink in. A legitimate business that lost 9 out of 10 shipments would file for bankruptcy before the end of the quarter. A drug cartel treats a 90% loss rate as acceptable. That is not because the margins are great. That is because the cost of the raw product is so absurdly low that even catastrophic losses do not eliminate the profit on the 10th shipment that gets through. But that math only works if you control the entire chain from production to street. Most people in the drug business do not control the chain. They control one link in a very long chain, and their margin on that single link is nowhere near as impressive as the 4,000% markup the headline numbers suggest. The street dealer buying an ounce from a mid-level distributor is not making 4,000%. They are making enough to eat, and barely. The most famous study of drug gang finances was conducted by economists Stephen Levitt and Sudhir Venkatesh, who obtained the actual accounting records of a Chicago street gang. Their findings were devastating to the popular image of drug money. The median earnings for a street-level drug seller in Washington, D.C. markets were $721 per month. Not per week, per month. Enforcers, the people with the guns, earned roughly $17,000 per year, the equivalent of $8.26 an hour. At the same time, the gang leader was earning over $68,000 per year. That radical inequality is not a bug of the drug business. It is the feature. The leader takes the vast majority of the revenue, and the workers take the risk for a wage that is statistically lower than the legal alternative. The dealers know this, by the way. Levitt and Venkatesh found that most of them believed they were paying their dues, that they would eventually move up the ladder and become the ones earning the $68,000. Almost none of them did. There is a line item in the drug business that no legitimate company has on its balance sheet: war. When two cartels go to war over a territory, the price of drugs in that territory drops by 20 to 30%, according to the Levitt and Venkatesh data. That makes sense. Warfare is terrible for commerce. Customers do not want to buy drugs from a street corner where someone was shot last week. Dealers either stop working or demand hazard pay. Distribution routes get cut off. Law enforcement attention intensifies. The entire local market becomes toxic. And the cost of that war is not just lost revenue. It is ammunition, weapons, bribes to officials to look the other way during the conflict, medical care for wounded members, legal fees for arrested members, and funeral costs for the ones who do not make it. The Mexican cartels employ an estimated 175,000 people across the country, making them the fifth largest employer in Mexico. But they also need to recruit between 350 and 370 new people every single week just to replace the ones killed, arrested, or disappeared. That turnover rate would make Amazon warehouse managers weep. Let us talk specifically about fentanyl, because it represents the most extreme version of the drug math. According to the United States House Committee on Homeland Security, it costs approximately 10 cents to produce a single counterfeit fentanyl pill. That pill sells on the street for somewhere between $1 and $30, depending on the market and the potency. A 10-cent production cost and a $30 street price is a 30,000% markup. But here is the detail that changes the story. In 2025 alone, the Drug Enforcement Administration seized over 47 million fentanyl-laced counterfeit pills. Not 47,000, 47 million. The DEA believes they catch somewhere between 5 and 10% of what actually crosses the border. If that estimate is correct, then over 470 million fentanyl pills successfully entered the United States in a single year. The production cost for those pills is roughly $47 million. The street value is over $1 billion. But the cost of getting caught, the prison sentences, the asset forfeiture, the death penalty eligible charges, that cost is incalculable. And the cartels are treating fentanyl like a commodity that is so cheap to produce that even running a 90% seizure rate, they still come out ahead. Here is the part of the drug business that almost nobody thinks about until they actually own one. You have made $1 million in cash. Now what? You cannot deposit it in a bank without triggering a suspicious activity report. You cannot buy a house with it. You cannot buy a car with it. You cannot put it in your child's college fund. It is $1 million that you cannot spend without explaining where it came from. This is not a minor inconvenience. It is an existential operating cost. Estimates suggest that drug traffickers need to launder approximately 25% of their revenue just to make it usable. The classic method, smuggling physical cash, costs between 10 and 17% of the amount moved. A new method using cryptocurrency through Chinese money brokers reduces that cost to around 3%, which is why the Sinaloa cartel moved over $50 million through a single crypto laundering operation between 2019 and 2024 before the FBI shut it down. But even at 3%, you are paying $3 on every 100 just to turn dirty money into usable money. And the service providers take a cut at every stage. A money broker charging under 6% is considered a good deal because they profit twice. First by cleaning the drug cash, then by reselling the dollars at a premium to clients in countries with currency controls. No discussion of drug cartel economics would be complete without Pablo Escobar, because his story is the most spectacular illustration of why the drug business is a terrible investment even when you win. At his peak, Escobar's Medellin cartel was generating an estimated $420 million per week. His net worth was estimated at $30 billion. And yet, according to his brother and accountant, Roberto Escobar, the cartel spent $2,500 per month on rubber bands. Not on security, not on bribes, on rubber bands to hold the stacks of cash together. The cartel lost an estimated $2.1 billion per year because rats chewed through the cash stored in warehouses and water damage ruined the rest. They could not deposit it, they could not spend it fast enough. At one point, Escobar burned $2 million to keep his daughter warm while the family was on the run. The man who built the most profitable criminal enterprise in history ended up dying on a rooftop, barefoot, running from the police he had once paid to protect him. The cash was useless. The empire was temporary, and the rubber band budget was a symptom of a business model that generated more money than the owner could physically manage. Now consider the regulatory environment, because calling it regulation understates the situation. The United States government has spent over $1 trillion on the war on drugs since the 1970s. The Drug Enforcement Administration has a budget of over $3 billion per year. Special Forces units conduct operations in foreign countries without consent from those governments. In 2025, the United States designated Mexican drug cartels as foreign terrorist organizations, giving the military broad authority to use direct force against cartel leadership. There is no OSHA for the drug trade. There is no FDA. There is no business license renewal. The regulator in this industry can kill you, seize everything you own, imprison you for life, and then hold a press conference about it. And unlike a legitimate business, you cannot sue, you cannot lobby, you cannot donate to political campaigns, and you cannot hire a compliance officer to navigate the regulations. You can only bribe, threaten, or hide. And every one of those options gets more expensive and more dangerous the longer you stay in business. The drug business has a franchise problem, and it works exactly the way fast food franchising works. Tom Wainwright, the former Mexico City bureau chief for The Economist, wrote an entire book called Narconomics, documenting how the Sinaloa cartel operates like Walmart and the Jalisco cartel operates like McDonald's. The big cartels license their brand to smaller local crews. The local crews pay for the right to use the cartel's name, smuggling routes, and supply connections. In return, the cartel takes a cut of every shipment. The local crew assumes all the risk. If the crew gets caught, the cartel disavows them and recruits a replacement crew within a week. DEA Administrator Ann Milgram testified to Congress in 2023 that Mexico's two most powerful cartels, Sinaloa and Jalisco, have approximately 45,000 members, associates, and facilitators spanning over 100 countries. But only a few hundred of those people are actual leadership. The rest are franchisees who pay for the privilege of taking risks the cartel bosses are too smart to take themselves. Being a cartel boss is a great business if you survive long enough to enjoy it. Being a cartel employee is a terrible business, and most people in the drug trade are employees. One of the most revealing facts about modern cartels is how much of their revenue now comes from activities that have nothing to do with drugs. The same organizations that smuggle cocaine and fentanyl also run human trafficking operations, fuel theft rings, avocado cartels, mining concessions, and real estate development. The House Homeland Security Committee estimated that in 2021 alone, cartels made $13 billion just from human smuggling and trafficking. That is more than many legitimate multinational corporations earn in the same period. Why diversification? Because the drug business is too volatile to rely on exclusively. Seizure rates fluctuate, prices fluctuate, law enforcement priorities shift. A cartel that depends entirely on cocaine revenue is one bad policy change away from insolvency. So the cartels do what every savvy business does. They diversify. They invest in legal and illegal economies. They buy restaurants, construction companies, mining operations, and real estate. They blur the line between dirty money and legitimate investment until it is almost impossible for authorities to untangle. And the irony is that the more successful a cartel becomes at diversifying, the less it looks like a drug cartel, and the more it looks like a holding company with a logistics problem. Let us try to build a rough income statement for a mid-level cartel operation. Assume the organization controls a corridor that moves 1,000 kilograms of cocaine per year. At Colombian wholesale prices, the product cost is roughly $1.5 million. By the time it reaches the U.S. border, packaging, transport, bribes, and salaries have added roughly $10 million. The wholesale value at the border is about $30 million, but 30% of the product gets seized, so adjust the revenue down to $21 million. Then subtract money laundering costs at 7%, another $1.5 million. Subtract legal defense fund contributions, equipment replacement, medical costs for injured members, and payments to corrupt officials. What remains is perhaps $8 to $10 million in profit for the entire organization. And that profit must be split among the leadership, the Zhongceng management, the sicarios, the lookouts, the drivers, the accountants. The capo at the top might take 4 or 5 million. The people doing the actual work take barely enough to survive, and everyone involved faces a prison sentence that, if federal prosecutors in the United States have their way, will be measured in decades, not years. So what do you actually own when you own a drug cartel? You own a supply chain that loses 30 to 40% of its inventory to seizure. You employ a workforce that earns less than minimum wage and has a turnover rate of 350 people per week. Your revenue is in a form you cannot use without paying 7 to 25% of it to launderers. Your regulator can kill you and seize everything you built. Your best employees are either in prison, dead, or waiting to betray you. And if you are successful enough to accumulate real wealth, you will spend $2,500 a month on rubber bands and lose $2 billion a year to rats. The economics of owning a drug cartel is the economics of every terrible business idea. The headline numbers look incredible. The actual numbers are a nightmare. The people who get rich are not the ones doing the work. They are the ones selling the fantasy that the work pays off. And the fantasy, as it turns out, is the only product that reliably delivers a return. Everything else is just a product that costs 10 cents to make and will get you killed before you figure out how to spend the first dollar.